It was a bright summer morning at Arlington National Cemetery. The sun was already high in the sky, and the white marble stones glowed under the heat. A quiet breeze moved through the rows of graves, carrying a soft hum of respect that always seemed to rest over this sacred place. Tourists walked slowly, whispering as they passed, many holding cameras but too moved to speak loudly. At the heart of it all stood the tomb of the unknown soldier, a place where silence spoke louder than words. In front of the tomb stood Sergeant Mark Hollis, a tomb guard of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. His tall frame was straight as a line, his eyes fixed forward. He was dressed in the traditional uniform, polished shoes, pressed jacket, white gloves, and a cap that shaded his steady face. Every move of a tomb guard was measured, trained, and full of meaning. But today was no ordinary day for Mark. His shift had begun early that morning and something had gone wrong. A miscommunication between the guard's rotation team had delayed his relief. What was supposed to be a routine post of 30 minutes had stretched past an hour, then 2. And now, 3 hours later, Mark was still standing in position, his hand raised in salute. Sweat trickled down his forehead. His gloves were damp, but he didn't move. The sun burned stronger, the crowd thickened, and whispers began to spread among the visitors. A little boy pointed and asked his father, "Why doesn't he stop?" "He looks tired." His father, a veteran himself, answered softly, "Because that's his duty, son. Those men under that tomb never stopped serving. Neither will he." People began to realize that they were witnessing something rare. Tourists stopped taking pictures and instead stood silently, watching the man who refused to lower his arm. Every second stretched longer and the air around seemed to hold its breath. Some tried to offer him water from a distance, but the guard's rules were clear. No one breaks formation, no matter what. Mark's arm began to ache, but he didn't let it fall. He thought of the unknown soldiers resting below his feet, men who had fought, bled, and died without names. He thought of his grandfather, who had once served in World War II and never spoke about what he saw. He thought about why he joined the army in the first place, not for medals, not for praise, but to stand for something bigger than himself. The temperature climbed higher. Tourists started leaving for shade, but some stayed behind, unable to walk away from the sight. It was almost like time had frozen, just one soldier standing alone, his shadow sharp against the marble. The world around him moved, but he remained still, loyal to his post, loyal to his oath. Then slowly, clouds began to gather. The bright sky dimmed and the wind grew stronger. It looked like rain was coming, but still, Mark did not move. His uniform flapped slightly, his salute unshaken. By now, over 4 hours had passed. His body was exhausted, but his spirit was unbroken. A few people whispered that the guards should call it off, but they didn't understand. Tomb guards never leave their post unless officially relieved. Rain or shine, day or night, they protect that tomb. Soon, thunder rumbled in the distance. Drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the marble. People ran for cover, pulling out umbrellas, but Mark stood alone under the open sky, still saluting. His uniform darkened as the rain soaked him, but he didn't blink. To him, it wasn't just about following an order. It was about respect, for the fallen, for the promise he made when he put on that uniform, for every soldier who never got to come home. As the rain turned heavier, something remarkable began to happen. The small group of visitors who stayed behind started to form a loose circle around him. Some removed their hats, some placed their hands over their hearts. No one spoke. No one moved close. They just stood there, quietly honoring the man who refused to lower his arm even when nature tested him. Inside, Mark's thoughts were fading between pain and purpose. His muscles screamed, his hand felt numb, but his heart kept him steady. He remembered his first day of guard training, how his commander told him, "A true guard doesn't need an audience. He does his duty because it's right." Those words echoed in his head like a song, keeping him going through the burning in his shoulders. 5 hours had nearly passed. The rain began to ease, leaving a shimmer on the ground. The crowd had changed. Most tourists were gone, but a few stayed behind, looking at the guard as if watching a living statue of courage. None of them knew that something extraordinary was about to happen next. Somewhere down the road, the faint sound of engines began to rise, low, deep, and growing louder. At first, no one paid attention, but soon, heads started to turn. The sound wasn't just one engine, it was dozens. Within minutes, a line of motorcycles appeared through the cemetery gates, moving slowly and respectfully. The riders were members of a veteran biker group called the Rolling Thunder. They had heard what was happening from social media and decided to come see it with their own eyes. They parked their bikes quietly at a distance. No engines revved, no one shouted. They simply stepped off, removed their helmets, and stood silently. Each man and woman knew what that soldier was going through. They had faced their own battles, their own tests of endurance. But watching a single tomb guard holding his salute for hours, alone and unwavering, touched them deeply. And in that moment, something powerful connected everyone there. The rain, the bikers, the quiet visitors, and the lone soldier who hadn't moved for 5 long hours. It was a moment of pure respect, of shared honor, where words weren't needed. The silence said it all. The engines of the motorcycles rumbled softly, growing louder as they rolled closer to the tomb. But even the sound of dozens of machines could not disturb the quiet reverence of the cemetery. The bikers, many of whom had served in wars themselves, parked their motorcycles carefully at a respectful distance. They removed their helmets, revealing weathered faces, some lined with scars and stories from battles fought long ago. They didn't rush forward. They didn't shout. They simply walked slowly toward the tomb, their boots making soft, echoing sounds on the damp pavement. Each of them carried a quiet respect in their posture, shoulders back, heads high, eyes fixed on the lone soldier who had held his salute for 5 hours straight. Mark Hollis had not yet noticed them fully, lost in the endurance of his own duty. His arm ached. His shoulder burned. His feet felt heavy, but he would not move. Every second was a promise to the fallen soldiers who rested beneath him. One of the bikers, a tall man named Harris, had served in Vietnam decades earlier. He knew the weight of watching friends die, the silence that followed loss, and the honor that remained even when the world moved on. Harris felt a surge of emotion as he looked at Mark. This young guard was doing something extraordinary, not for fame, not for praise, but out of sheer respect for the unknown soldiers who gave their lives. Harris stepped forward and carefully placed a bottle of cold water on the ground near the tomb. It was a simple gesture, but it carried meaning. It was an offering, a way of saying, "We see your effort. We honor your courage." The other bikers followed suit, lining up quietly, each leaving behind small symbols of respect, unit patches, medals, and folded caps. They did not speak. They did not clap. They simply stood, forming a living barrier of honor around the tomb and its guard. Mark finally noticed them. At first he was surprised. He had not expected anyone to witness this, let alone take action. He felt a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Even after hours of standing, he recognized the deep respect emanating from the bikers. They were strangers, yet in that moment, they shared a connection stronger than words. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line as he focused on the salute, refusing to let his arm drop too soon. The crowd of tourists who remained watched in awe. Some whispered that they had never seen anything like this before. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. They could feel the gravity of the moment, the guard standing unwavering, the bikers showing their silent respect, and the shared reverence for those who had sacrificed everything. Harris finally spoke, his voice low and steady but still audible over the faint drizzle of rain. "Young man," he said, "we don't often get to thank those who protect the memory of the fallen. Today we honor you." Mark nodded slightly, too exhausted to speak. Words were not needed. His heart swelled with emotion as he realized that the effort he had poured into his duty had inspired something far beyond what he had imagined. He was not alone. In the silence, he could feel the presence of every soldier who had ever stood at attention, every life lost in service to the country, and every hand that had placed respect over self. As the bikers stood there, a few began to share quiet stories with each other. They spoke of friends lost, of battles fought, of promises kept. Every story seemed to echo the same sentiment. Duty was not just a word. It was a way of life. And seeing Mark hold that salute reminded them of the values they had carried through their own lives. Hours had passed, and the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the cemetery. The air cooled slightly and the rain had stopped, leaving the ground glistening in a soft light. Mark's arm had grown numb, his body shaking from exhaustion, but he still remained at attention. The bikers, sensing his struggle, did not approach him directly. They maintained their positions, forming a wall of respect that allowed him to finish his duty without interruption. One of the younger bikers, named Liam, finally took a careful step forward. He held in his hand a small patch from his old unit. "For you," he said quietly, "for the honor you've shown today." He placed it gently at the base of the tomb alongside the water bottle and other items. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight far greater than the physical object itself. It was a symbol of gratitude, of understanding, and of shared sacrifice. The atmosphere grew heavier with emotion. Tourists stopped taking photos. Cameras were lowered. Every person present seemed to recognize that this was more than a display of endurance. It was a lesson in honor, respect, and human connection. People felt privileged to witness something rare and profound, a guard who could hold his salute for hours, and a group of bikers who could respond with the kind of respect that only comes from shared experience and deep empathy. Mark's mind wandered, back to the first time he had taken the oath to guard the tomb. He remembered the training, the strict rules, and the countless drills. He remembered being told that guarding the tomb was not just about ceremony, it was about carrying the weight of history, of loss, and of memory. Today, as his arm trembled and his muscles burned, he understood that lesson in a way that no training could have fully prepared him for. The bikers, standing silently, formed a circle of honor around him. Each of them had served, each had faced trials, and each understood the meaning of sacrifice. And while they could not feel the physical strain that Mark was enduring, they felt the emotional weight, the courage, and the unwavering determination that he displayed. As the hours dragged on, the unusual sight of the bikers in the tomb guard caught the attention of local news reporters. They snapped photos and captured video, but even they were careful to maintain the reverence of the moment. No one dared to interrupt. The story was already being told, not through words but through actions, endurance, and silent respect. Finally, as the 6th hour approached, the new guard arrived to relieve Mark. He had held his salute longer than anyone could have imagined, pushing himself through pain, exhaustion, and disbelief. The bikers, sensing the change, began to step back, forming a respectful line that allowed the new guard to take position without distraction. Mark lowered his arm slowly, his muscles shaking with relief and fatigue. The bikers nodded, offering small smiles of acknowledgement, and the remaining tourists clapped softly as if even the quietest form of applause could honor such courage. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of awe, respect, and gratitude. Before leaving, Harris approached Mark and extended his hand. "You've done something incredible today," he said. "Not many people could endure what you just did, and not many would. We honor you." Mark shook his hand, his body tired, but his spirit lifted. "Thank you," he whispered. "It was my duty. That's all." The bikers mounted their motorcycles again, engines purring softly, and rode off into the fading light. But the impression they left remained. A circle of honor, a shared moment of respect, and a memory that would stay with everyone who witnessed it. The story of the guard and the bikers would spread, inspiring countless people with its message of duty, sacrifice, and human connection. And even as the sun set over Arlington National Cemetery, the spirit of honor remained, etched into the minds and hearts of all who were present. The moment finally came when the relief guard arrived. After standing at attention for over 5 hours, Mark's body ached in ways he had never felt before. His shoulders were stiff, his arms trembled, and his legs felt like they were made of lead. Yet even as he prepared to step away, he maintained the discipline that had guided him for years. Every movement was precise, every step measured, because the duty of a tomb guard was never just about him. It was about the soldiers who had given everything. As he lowered his hand from the salute, the crowd that had gathered remained silent. The bikers, who had been standing off to the side in quiet respect, began to move closer, forming a line that mirrored the tomb guard's own steadfast presence. One by one, they raised their hands in salute. It was not a loud or flashy gesture. There were no cheers or applause, only a deep, shared understanding that this moment was about honor, courage, and respect. Mark's eyes met the gaze of Harris, the Vietnam veteran who had arrived with the group. Harris had seen more battles than he could count, but even he seemed moved in a way that words could not capture. He stepped forward holding a small flag in his hands, folded neatly and crisp. Without saying a word, he placed it on the base of the tomb, alongside the other patches and medals that the bikers had laid down earlier. It was a silent gesture, but it carried the weight of generations of service, sacrifice, and unspoken gratitude. The visitors who had stayed behind watched in awe. Many had cameras, but most forgot to take pictures. This was a moment meant to be felt, not captured. Parents whispered explanations to their children about bravery and respect. Veterans nodded silently, some with tears glistening in their eyes. Everyone understood that this scene was extraordinary, not because of heroics in battle, but because of the power of quiet endurance and shared honor. Mark stepped back slowly, feeling the stiffness in his body. Each movement was deliberate, careful, and respectful. As he took his first steps away from the tomb, a gentle rain began to fall again, like nature itself was joining in the salute. The droplets touched his face, his wet uniform clinging to him, but he didn't mind. He had long ago stopped thinking about comfort. This was about duty, about a promise kept, about a gesture of respect that would live long after he walked away. The bikers began to speak softly among themselves, sharing words of admiration for Mark. They knew what it meant to endure pain, to show loyalty, and to honor those who could no longer speak for themselves. One by one, they approached Mark, offering water, steady hands, and quiet congratulations. Harris placed a hand on Mark's shoulder and said, "You honored them today, soldier. Now let us honor you." Mark looked around and saw the faces of all who had gathered, tourists, veterans, bikers, and even a few young children. Their eyes were full of respect, gratitude, and understanding. He realized in that moment that his 5 hours at attention had created something larger than himself. It had inspired others, reminded them of the power of discipline, respect, and human connection. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause, as if the cemetery itself recognized the magnitude of what had just occurred. Later, news of the event spread quickly. Photos and videos captured the scene. The lone tomb guard, the bikers, the quiet crowd. But none of them could fully express the depth of the experience. People around the country shared the story, calling it a testament to human endurance and respect for those who sacrificed everything. Messages poured in from veterans, families, and strangers who felt moved by the simple yet powerful display of honor. Despite the attention, Mark remained humble. He never sought recognition or praise. To him, standing for 5 hours had not been about being seen. It had been about keeping a promise, upholding a tradition, and honoring the lives of the unknown soldiers beneath the tomb. Yet, even in humility, he felt a profound connection to everyone who had witnessed that day. The bikers, the visitors, the veterans, they had all shared in that silent, powerful tribute, and in doing so, had reinforced the meaning of his service. In the weeks that followed, Mark returned to his regular duties. Every day he continued his work with the same precision, respect, and devotion. But he carried with him the memory of that extraordinary moment, the moment when strangers, bikers, and visitors joined him in honoring something greater than themselves. He often thought of Harris and the other veterans, remembering the quiet strength of their presence and the way they had shown gratitude without words. For the bikers, the visit left a lasting impression as well. They spoke to friends, family, and fellow veterans about the courage and dedication of the tomb guard. They shared stories of discipline, honor, and the bonds that form when people come together to recognize sacrifice. It was a story that inspired others to respect tradition, to value service, and to remember that acts of courage do not always happen on the battlefield. They can happen in quiet, steadfast moments that touch hearts everywhere. Mark's salute that day became more than just a personal act of devotion. It became a symbol of human endurance, of unwavering respect, and of the way people can come together in shared honor, even without knowing each other. It reminded everyone that bravery is not always loud or dramatic. It can be quiet, patient, and steadfast. Sometimes it is the moments of silence, the hours of stillness, and the unwavering gestures of respect that leave the deepest mark on the world. Years later, people still talk about that day. The story is told in schools, shared among veterans groups, and remembered by anyone who values service and respect. Mark never stopped being a tomb guard, but he knew that the 5-hour salute and the arrival of the bikers had created something timeless. It was a story of humanity, of honor, and of the unbreakable bond between those who serve and those who remember. And in the quiet of Arlington, beneath the shade of the marble stones and the whisper of the wind, the memory of that day lives on. The tomb guard, the bikers, and the silent crowd all became part of a story that reminds the world of one simple truth. True honor is shown not in words or fame, but in steadfast devotion, quiet courage, and the respect we give to those who gave everything. Even today, visitors pause at the tomb of the unknown soldier, recalling the sight of a lone guard holding his salute for hours, and the bikers who arrived to do the unthinkable, not in danger but in respect. And as they remember, they understand that every act of honor, no matter how small or quiet, has the power to inspire countless hearts.